was generally very sick. I did discover, though, that stale pie was very good with milk, sort of like a pudding. But in spite of the thicker than average crust, I loved her butter tarts. After I moved away, and after she moved away, she would make me butter tarts whenever she knew I was coming to visit. Unfortunately, once I moved out to Alberta from Ontario, our visits were generally once per year. I would spoil her by buying things she wouldn't buy herself, like salmon, tomatoes in the winter, cherry chocolates, and cheese. And she would spoil me by making butter tarts. The last time I visited my grandmother before she became bedridden and unable to live on her own was 5 months before she died. It was April, and my daughter and I drove from Toronto along the St. Lawrence River to Brockville, where she was living close to my aunt. We stopped along the way and picked a bouquet of dried weeds and flowers, a wonderful collection, which I still have, 22 years later. She was having difficulties walking by this time and unable to get out to the shops on her own. Since she was always an extremely independent lady who hated to ask for assistance, she only went shopping on rare occasions when my aunt was available and she was feeling up to it. She apologized for not being able to make a proper lunch for us, but she had made my favorite butter tarts. As most experienced cooks, Grandma was able to change the recipe to match what was available. We all know that that doesn't always work for everything or at all times. This was one of those times. I can't remember today what it was she didn't have in her kitchen, but I think it was something quite basic, like butter, cream, or sugar. In any case, she compromised, but she made those tarts. They tasted terrible. But that didn't matter, and she wasn't going to hear that from me. They were the most wonderful tarts I had ever eaten. And indeed, since they turned out to be the last ones she would ever make for me, they were the most wonderful tarts that I had ever eaten. I loved my grandmother's Christmas cake and pudding, which I have the recipes for, and I have other recipes for a variety of things that she sent me over the years. But even to this day, every time I have a butter tart, or refuse a butter tart, or see a butter tart, I think of my grandmother and the special relationship